Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck has been on my list for a while now. Of course, everybody, obviously, it's a kind of a rite of passage in schools for like at least almost as long as it's been out, since 1937 when it was initially published. I think it's been pretty much didn't take long for it to be quickly like a classic that's been circulated around, and because it is it's a pretty staunch morality tale, to put it simply. And it is pretty short. It is like I think that's why it's so easy. It's accessible towards younger people. And again, I'm not one of those people that actually read it. But I did see the movie with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich. And I vaguely remember, the parts and like stuff, with like Lenny Small being kind of like a gentle person, but he's like so big that he can't help himself sometimes when he's like gets excited and fearful. I did get kind of the general idea, but it wasn't until a few weeks ago that I actually read it. And I understand why it's a classic. You could, just like To Kill a Mockingbird, people could call it overrated, or Huckle, or anything like Mark Twain's oeuvre of different, like Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer, like all these different things. But I don't know. I think it deserves that kind of status, because there's a truth in that simplicity of just like a three act kind of to the point narrative. It's a realism. I think it's especially John Steinbeck. A lot of his works are like that. Like Grapes of Wrath, which I also semi recently read. And yeah, like East of Eden, I've yet to read yet, but I am a little bit intimidated because it is like a little bit larger of a work. So might be till maybe next year till I start reading that. We'll see. But yeah, I think Of Mice and Men. So it's about Lenny Small and George Milton, who are friends, but they actually often, because George Milton is kind of he's an on edge, but he's a kind of a smart guy, clever in a street smart kind of way. I mean, he's uneducated, but he's got like a when it comes to like kind of like the ways about, he knows his way around, like in the sense of it's the Great Depression, to put some context in it, and things aren't going well for them in Soledad, California. I can't remember the name. Or so they're somewhere like, I think, North Carolina, where they're not North. I'm sorry, California. I'm getting mixed up here. When I thought of like farming, I thought about the Carolinas for some reason, but it's California, I believe, that they're in, which shows up quite a bit in Steinbeck stuff, I think, because he was actually from there. But yeah, because there's almost like a Western kind of feel to it. But yeah, they're migrant kind of workers, and they're trying to find. And a lot of people were like that in the 1930s, and the 20s, and coming into the Great Depression. You had like prior to the New Deal and all that. From what I remember, it's like everybody was kind of just vying for jobs, and a lot of people had to travel for work, and they so basically Lenny Small and George Milton are travel buddies, and they it's not like they dislike each other, but it's Lenny is basically, everybody kind of knows this already, but he's a kind of mentally challenged, slow-witted, but gentle, docile man, but he's this great hulking guy. He's like well over 6 feet. He's like like very strong. He's very strong. That's why he's like quite he does have a like a viable, almost like utility, not not to put it kind of like heartlessly, but he has a utility on the farms, because he's able to kind of hurl and pick stuff up. He's like kind of like George vies for him a lot too, as almost as much as he for every like kind of bad, or for every 5 bad things he has to say about Lenny and complaining about him, but he does have like one good thing, and he's like, well, he'll work, he's got the strongest hands I've ever seen. So yeah, but Lenny is it's revealed later on in the story that Lenny accidentally got in. There was a woman who I think like he was talking to in a barn, I think, and it's foreshadowing obviously, but and then he start like, because he has such a predilection for soft things, like anytime he sees a puppy or anytime he sees like the goat fur or rabbit fur, he's like obsessed with fur. I think that's like the first thing you actually hear from Lenny, is like him like marveling at the, like, oh, let me touch the fur, and like of much to George Milton's chagrin. But yeah, I think he's trying to touch this woman's hair, and then she like gets scared and then starts like struggling, and then the more scared she gets, the more he gets, like the more he kind of like braces onto her, and she ends up surviving, thank goodness, but ends up telling everybody else that she was raped by Lenny, and but anybody who knows him like knows he's not like such a bad guy, like he wouldn't do that, but it's this inadvertent kind of unwitting good-naturedness, but like unwitting, like a holy fool almost, like he's so he's got the mentality of a child, which they say later on in the book. So yeah, George Milton and him start traveling around, and they go to further down south, I think in California, where they get hired as ranch hands on this farm, and there's this man named Curly on the farm who's kind of younger, and he's very brash and very just very like, not like a horrible person like right off the bat, like you don't get, but he's very impetuous and like very not bipolar, but just like 1 second he might be really good mood and ecstatic, and the next second he might be like wanting to strangle somebody. So he's just a very kind of eccentric character right off the bat. And Curly has a young wife who's kind of a wannabe actress and aspiring to be in the movie business, which probably during the Great Depression, I think just as like any type of business, probably wasn't doing any better than that. So she's like very she's very kind of stuck in a dead end marriage, and she doesn't really there's like a gap between her and Curly, and the reason why you don't actually get her real name in this, like Curly, she's referred to as kind of obliquely as Curly's wife, is because Steinbeck actually said something to the effect that like she doesn't actually serve any more purpose in the novel other than as a kind of foil to kind of veer into kind of attract rather Lenny in this drastic direction, which she does effectively in the novel. I'm not sure if that's like I think that was pretty clear, but I'm not exactly sure what exactly he was going with but I think she did represent a kind of like there's almost like a femme fatale thing with her, because she's also George, and along with I think this other guy Slim, I think and then there's Candy's like there's a gentle older guy, I think, or maybe mixing up with Slim, but there's two other guys that work with them too, who are kind of like, one of them actually kind of understands Lenny a bit better. Like he understands that he's just a child, kind of, a full-grown one, and he's a lot more reasonable and can gives him like a batch of they had a batch of puppies that ended up dying, I think, or no, they had a sheepdog that ended up dying, I think, being put down probably due to rabies, and then had a batch of puppies, and they ended up giving one to Lenny. And this is right away you're kind of like, okay, Lenny plus small creatures with fur, not a good mix, maybe, which might be a little bit on the nose maybe, but I think again, this is kind of like supposed to be more of an accessible kind of morality tale, but not too on the nose. Obviously, it's got subtlety. I like that. But yeah, it's he gives him this puppy, and he starts stroking it, and then that leads him to accidentally killing it, and then Lenny just like beats himself up over it. He's like, oh no. That's another thing. The dream is what is established early on, where Lenny and George, they mostly George's idea, because he's like kind of thinking, he doesn't, obviously Lenny doesn't have the faculty, but George, he while he can be rough and abrasive, and he'll often kind of push Lenny aside, and he'll be like, he'll talk kind of badly about him, or he'll be like, oh, you're costing me this, and like he's thrust himself in. At the same time, he's also interesting character with George, because he thrust himself into this situation where he's actually caring a lot and sacrificing a lot of his own well-being and putting his neck on the line a lot, in order that Lenny is able. It's almost like he's like a bit of a parent, like a bit of a like grumpy grandfather, trying to keep track of, like their kids in order. But yeah, it's like it's a strange relationship, because I've kind of seen that a little bit. Maybe not so strange. I think I've seen dynamics like that in real life, where friends are sometimes made, or brothers or siblings. You find that are sometimes kind of made under these really odd circumstances of just kind of like, depending on like temperament or intelligence, that can be a luck of the draw. Like Lenny didn't ask to be that way, thrust into this world. Neither did George, though. Like he didn't ask to be more kind of like a conscious, like a security conscious type of person. He didn't, like trying to. There's a loyalty streak, I think, with him. Like he's like kind of a, I don't know, diamond in the rough, diamond in the rough. No, he's a bit of a like he's not likable per se, but and it definitely took me but you understand where he's coming from. I think you emphasize with his condition, with his circumstances, being like he has to kind of cover for Lenny, and then he has to say that, like, oh, I'm actually his, when he actually part of how he gets hired at the ranch is because he's claims that Lenny is his mentally disabled cousin, I think, and he says that he was kicked on the head by a horse as a kid, and yeah, so it's kind of a, he's always trying to kind of planning one step ahead kind of thing, but ultimately, like, the dream is there for them to have their own farm where the he George Milton can take care of like pretty much all the different animals and stock and all that, and kind of brew this new livelihood for them in this burgeoning dream. But and they actually see it kind of come to fruition here and there. But yeah, and then Lenny is supposed to be like, taking care of the rabbits and making them eat all alfalfa, and so they would kind of repeat that every time, like they're trying to jinx themselves or trying to motivate themselves in a way to add some incentive into like going back to these horrible, well, not horrible, very struggling, trying to make it in the world. And turns out it's not so easy, because I mean, no matter how good-natured Lenny is, it doesn't stop the fact that people are very short-sighted and opportunistic and vain, and they only see him as a means to kind of like, as means to an end, really. So when Lenny inadvertently does this thing with Curly's wife, like, she offers up her hair because it's very curly. No, I mean, I don't know if that was an intended pun, but it's definitely very fitting. But yeah, she allows Lenny to pet her hair, and then all of a sudden she's like, yeah, okay, you can stop now. And then you kind of see where this is going, where, he's kind of a little bit sulking because he thinks that the dream is dead because he's accidentally strangled his puppy, and he's hiding off in the barn. And yeah, Curly's wife comes in, and it's just like nothing but trouble. I mean, George Milt, he and the rest of them are all kind of like seeing where this is going. Like, they're like, okay, yeah, she's no good. She's like very kind of like a not damaged goods, but kind of like the femme fatale. Not to bring that word up again, but like she's got that kind of edge of innocence mixed with a little bit of kind of like a seduction kind of thing, where it's like she's leading men on, maybe. And then Lenny obviously is attracted to her because he, right off the bat, he kind of by his reaction, is like, it's pretty obvious that he is attracted physically to Curly's wife. So again, this is kind of leading in a direction, very ugly direction, one ripe for dramatics. And it turns out he ends up, when she struggles to let go, he ends up accidentally breaking her neck with the force of his embrace. And yeah, because that's the only thing he can think to do is like that. And yeah, he ends up killing her, and it's just, he ends up running away, and he's just like totally shocked and distraught, like off in the woods. And then Curly finds out, and then ends up just completely losing it, and then grabbing all these other ranch hands, and they're like forming a lynch mob, and they're gonna go find Lenny, and really and just completely just give him hell, and but and it ends up, George finds him, and probably the most sobering part of the entire story, it's all leading up, is just like when he is talking about his dream one more time. It's like Lenny's telling, he's like, we're gonna have the rabbits and the alfalfa and the farm. It's like, yes, Lenny, we're gonna have that. And you can see, like, you can sense in George's voice that he's just like completely just sober, like he's just completely completely like broken by his spirit is just broken by the end of the novel. He's just like, he knows what's going to happen is that the lynch mob, when they get at him, is going to be so like horrifying and so brutal that him aiming a gun at Lenny's head and shooting him in this quick way is actually going to be better in this utilitarian strange sense. And it's just like, yeah, that's and that's how it ends. It's like, it's very broken hearted, very heartbreaking kind of ending to that, because I didn't quite expect it, actually. I don't think I remember watching the movie at that young. I think I actually probably ducked out of there, but I think before then, I'm not sure. I must have just been watched it kind of in short bursts, maybe. But yeah, just that I think it was Slim or Candy. I think they were both saying that, like, they didn't understand why George, why he looked so sad for, like, they're going to go get a beer or something, and they're, him and I think Candy were both going to do that, and he didn't understand exactly why he would be so sad, but like, like the entire story of, like, George's existence up until that point has just been, like, kind of ended, because he's been so long just, been defined. It's always been him and Lenny, so to have that all of a sudden just, like, torn apart is just, must be harrowing. So yeah, I think that's all I have on Mice and Men. I would like to do Grapes of Wrath next. I just want to make sure I get, like, kind of like brush up on the stories and the plot and, like, themes of it. But yeah, definitely similar kind of stark realism theme with, like, the Great Depression, kind of people, ordinary everyday people, kind of with some strange variations here and there thrown into otherwise situations that like very, like, kind of stoic, well, just awful situations, and then you having to kind of deal with that. But yeah,